Hi, everybody out there on Facebook. It is, of course, a grim week as we deal with the murder of Lauri Carleton, and that will be the top of our show this week. I'm sorry we are doing this with the Republican debate tonight, so we can't talk about that till next week. That should be pretty grim, also. Are you going to be watching that, Andy?
I'm taping it because I'm going to be out, and I'll watch it when I get home.
Well, I'll let you know if there are any highlights.
Well, when I come home, they'll probably be having all the analysis of the highlights and things.
That's true. You mean you prefer their highlights to my highlights?
No, I'm happy to get a private tour.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't start till 9:00, so you might even.
Yeah, I mean,
catch some.
Probably won't be home too late.
Yeah. Oh, good.
But I'll just put it on when I get here.
Okay.
Now, I will not be. Well, I will not be Twittering.
We're about to start.
Okay.
And we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann North.
And it's a pretty grim week. You've all read the news. The right wing's demonization of all things LGBTQ has led to the murder of Lauri Carleton, a 66-year-old ally of ours in California, shot dead for displaying a rainbow flag. Our guest, who will be joining us shortly, is Charley Beal, president of the Gilbert Baker Foundation, named for the creator of the rainbow flag that has become an international symbol of our liberation and a target of the fascist right.
All very suddenly. A fifth grade teacher in Georgia has had her firing upheld for reading a book to her students promoting understanding of transgender people.
North Carolina's Republicans have enacted 3 anti-LGBTQ bills over the veto of Democratic Governor Roy Cooper.
And Georgia's law against gender-affirming care is put mostly on hold by a federal judge.
But Alabama's was allowed to go into force. Ron DeSantis won't say what he'd do if one of his kids turns out to be LGBTQ.
I think there's no good answer for him to that question. I hope someone asks him that tonight, too. And a top White House gay lawyer is stepping down.
A suspicious death of a gay man in D.C. in May is not getting the police attention it deserves.
It's really kind of shocking the way the police talk themselves out of this. A trans woman convicted for insurrection in the January 6th uprising is pleading with MAGA Republicans to get her into a woman's prison. Good luck with that.
The International Chess Federation has banned trans women from women's matches.
Crazy. And Annette Bening is coming out with yet another lesbian role.
But we start with that horror in California. By now you've heard the story, but we're going to talk about the way it's being handled. And we're going to bring in our guest right now, right? Yes?
Sure.
Yes. Let's bring in Charley Beal. Charley Beal is the president of the Gilbert Baker Foundation. Charley is also a very prominent art director for major motion pictures and television programs, everything from Milk to Spider-Man. So welcome, Charley.
Thank you, Ann, and thank you, Andy, for having me on your show. I'm grateful for this and to help spread the legacy of Gilbert Baker. He was a close friend and a real hero in our movement.
So here's the situation. This woman runs a design shop in Lake Arrowhead there in California, and she's got a rainbow flag up, and this young man starts remonstrating with her about it, hurling slurs, and then just decides to shoot her dead.
Well, they got into a little argument. She, first of all, has been prominent in the fashion industry for years. She, for those of us who used to watch I Love Lucy, you'll remember the Fred Siegel dress shop, often referred to. She was a member of the Fred Siegel family, and she worked for Kenneth Cole, and then she opened her own store in LA, and then a second store in Lake Arrowhead. And a very prominent member of the community, a great activist, someone who was supportive on all sorts of issues, and had a husband, and together they had 9 children, a blended family. And she had had a rainbow flag up for a long time. It had been torn down several times before, and every time she would replace it with a bigger rainbow flag. And then this guy comes by, this Travis, where have I put his name?
Ikaguchi.
Travis Ikaguchi, 27 years old. There he is. We'll talk more about him in a minute. And he starts complaining about the rainbow flag in the store. And she confronts him about his slinging of homophobic slurs and complaints, and his trying to tear down the rainbow flag, and he pulls out a gun and shoots her.
Yeah, this is just terrible, and I've got to tell you, this sort of thing we think about happening, in other countries, but it's coming to our shores. We've been tracking this kind of violence for a long time. In 2021, there was the Iranian young man Alireza Fazeli Mofared, who was beheaded by his own family for having the gall to come out of the closet. But in reaction, his friends put rainbow flags on their backs and darted in and out of the streets of Tehran. They dared to do that in protest. In 2019, our friend Moses Mbazira organized the first Pride March in the Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya. This is the largest refugee camp in the world, a lot of Muslims there. They had about 50 people, and they got about 3/4 of a mile before they were attacked, beaten, their rainbow flags stolen and burned. And if you look at what's going on in China, 3 years ago, they shut down all the LGBTQ-friendly NGOs. This past spring, they shut down all the gay community centers, and this summer, they arrested 2 lesbians with a rainbow flag in a public park. So, it's been around the world. Vladimir Putin attacks Ukraine, claims that one of the problems there is they have these rainbow flags, and he is pledged to wipe the rainbow flag off the face of this earth. So we see this in other countries, but people have think, oh, it'll never happen here, but it has happened. And the reason happened is we saw it coming. There's been this wave of hate in this country, this whole wave of anti-trans healthcare bills that have been passed or have been proposed. There are ways of anti-LGBTQ curriculum. We work with a group called History Unerased, trying to help them as they're helping us. And people banning the rainbow flag. And people have banned the rainbow flag in over 40 towns and school districts across this country in the last year. It just popped up on our radar a year ago. We started asking for help. And gratefully, we got some help from the ACLU. And in February, we launched an initiative called Save the Rainbow Flag. And that is basically a website with a toolkit, including an incredible legal letter provided by the ACLU so that we can empower local activists in all these towns and cities and these school districts across the country to help fight back against these bullies. And what I tell you is, we don't want to just fight back. We want to win. And we have won in California. We've won in New Jersey. We've won in Florida. And we just had a victory recently in Maryland. And every time we have a victory, we get the whole committee together. We figure out what worked, what didn't. We refine it. We make it better. We're fighting now in Hamtramck, Michigan, and Roanoke, Virginia. But sadly, this hate just keeps coming. These people are horrible.
Well, what appalled me was that everything you're talking about, they talk about, oh, it's sad, how awful that this woman was killed. They don't do the context that you're doing and that we're going to do here. I mean, Travis Ikaguchi, they do say that he posted things like a burning of a rainbow flag. There is one of his posts.
Right.
But, he's a Christian nationalist. He says the only way to the path of salvation and to have eternal life is through Jesus Christ, and apparently murdering innocent people due to his warped views, which is nothing, of course, that Jesus taught, but this is what they're rooted in. You know, the as you wrote in your release, I mean, the blood of Lauri Carleton is on the hands of Fox News, you know, Tucker Carlson, later Fox News, all these people who have been whipping this up as if, you know, you have to stop this because these people are trying to get your children, basically. And as you said, they call us groomers, they call us, it's completely outrageous. Where are the reporters sticking the mics in the faces of these right-wing politicians as saying, is this what you want?
I thank you, Andy, for saying that, because, you know, we have managed to get some coverage in USA Today. We, coincidentally, the week we launched was the week that the Republicans in Florida introduced Bill HB 1011 to ban the rainbow flag on public buildings in Florida. And Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of the most hateful homophobes in this country, introduced a bill to the United States Congress with 30 MAGA co-signers to ban the rainbow flag on all public buildings in the United States. And to go into their chat rooms and to go onto their websites and their Facebook groups, Facebook pages, and see the rhetoric that they, you know, here they are in these silos, just getting this awful misinformation over and over again. And I have to say that, Andy, you know, I've been warned about this recently by a lot of people about the language they're using about they're after your children and they're calling you groomers. They did this in the 50s. They did this in the 70s. And, you know, it's not enough to just say they're using the rhetoric of the 50s. We need to go right back at them. And we need to say, hey, you know what? I was groomed to be straight by my family. I was groomed to be straight by my church. I was groomed to be straight by my school and everybody around me. And I still turned out gay. And if you're born straight, you're going to stay straight, even if your kid sits and watches a drag queen read a story in a library. And until we answer them directly with responses like that, we can't just say, oh, they're using that old rhetoric. We need to go right at them and disprove it to them again and again and again, because these backlashes have happened, you know, and they're going to happen, and we'll beat them back. They'll come back again. And
well, their rhetoric is all about indoctrination. You're indoctrinating our kids. We have parents' rights. I mean, who indoctrinated Travis Ikaguchi? Where is the recognition of the danger of what these right-wing religions and right-wing politics do to people that cause such violence?
And social media. Travis Ikaguchi was spending a lot of time online looking at websites like Gab or social media sites that are spewing this rhetoric. And I would say, yes, some of it is the same rhetoric as the 50s or the 30s or whatever, but it's accelerated geometrically. And it comes after a time that seemed to be a great enlightenment. We were making such progress, and suddenly it's like we've been yanked backwards by a chain, and by people who suddenly feel empowered to be more loud and overt about this hatred, about their violence, about their threats. It's just exploded suddenly in ways that I think were not so overt before.
And read the comments on this story on a website like the New York Post, where people just come in and they say, well, you know, yeah, but, you know, she's triggering these people with this thing. I mean, you know, what did she expect?
Yeah, well,
people put their names on these things and they post them on the internet like, you know, that's a valid view.
Well, you know, at the Gilbert Baker Foundation, we love doing exhibits. We love doing educational projects, but, you know, we're here as activists and we're not going to stand by when they do this. And we are going to fight back. And I have to tell you, I read a really encouraging story today in The Guardian about business owners and residents saying, no, I'm putting my pride flag up. You know, this woman in Texas who decorates her front yard with pride flags because she has children who are LGBTQ plus, you know, members of her family. And she said, what message would I send to my children if I stopped putting up my pride flags? She said, and I'll quote this, I'm going to read it. It does scare me some, but not enough to stop what I'm doing. Mama Bear will always fight for them. And I tell you, we will too. We're a small foundation. We don't have a lot of funding. I like to tell people we're a little foundation with a really big symbol, the rainbow flag. We're going to use that.
Show us some of the images that you've assembled about how the flag has been treated around the world. We're going to just start running them, Rich. Like, where's this?
This is in Russia. And as you know, this started over 10 years ago when I think it was actually when Medvedev, is that his name? The guy who was briefly president between Putin and Putin, decided he had to be more homophobic than Putin. And they started passing these laws in Russia. We've had heroes like Peter Tatchell go to Red Square and hold up a rainbow flag. Thank you, Peter. To protest, but they're also beating people. At this point, to fly a rainbow flag in Russia, you're taking your life into your own hands.
Let's go quickly through some of the others.
Yeah, this is the same. This is where you see, people fighting just over this symbol, and it is that big of a symbol. It's that people are that passionate about it. Gilbert understood that. When he created the flag, he always said flags are about power. And that's why they go after it. It's a very powerful symbol. It has the power that people put into it. When people love that flag, they're passionate about it. And that flag becomes stronger and stronger. I mean, I think Gilbert said it very eloquently in a really great book about flags. He said, a true flag is not designed, it's torn from the soul of the people. And our community feels very passionate about it. This is in Turkey, where in the last 10 years, again, things have moved backwards. They've tried twice in the last 5 years to have pride marches. And here come the water cannons and the tear gas and the police. I love this picture of this protester in Turkey defiantly fighting back. This is, again, Russia, where this guy was beaten bloody for, having a rainbow flag. And, we think we have it bad here. It's worse elsewhere, although now I can kind of understand how they feel, because now people are being murdered right here in our own country. This is New York City in 2010, where protesters had their flag taken away right here in New York City. So, it's the censorship can happen at home. This is here in New York City. An amazing activist, Stephen Love Menendez, puts all of our pride flags up at the Stonewall Memorial Park every year. And vandals came and took them all and destroyed them. And, this is Stonewall. This is the heart, the beating heart and soul of our movement. And to have this kind of vandalism, is frightening. And, this is a church in Eureka, California. It's, and by the way, I have to tell you, a lot of people don't know, we have a whole faith-based outreach program at our foundation. We work with Reverend Stringfellow in Detroit. We work with Pat Baumgarten here at the MCC Church. We work with the local gay synagogue. We work with faith leaders because, the thing about the rainbow flag, it's for everybody. It's for lawyers, it's for doctors, it's for soldiers, it's for activists. It's for people on the right and people on the left. It is not a political flag. We try to tell people that. We're very adamant about that. It's a flag for sexual and gender minorities. And when people hate sexual and gender minorities, you see what happens. You see right in this photo what happens. They want to burn it down. They want to erase us. They want to erase our symbol. They want to put us back in the closet or worse.
Well, and we should say that Ikaguchi was also a virulent anti-Semite. He also has adopted the whole right-wing thing against law enforcement and wants to do violence against them. It's like, Jim Jordan and you're weaponizing the FBI and we're going to get rid of you. And it's all part of that rhetoric. But, anti-Semitic violence and vandalism is way up too these days.
That's right. And like I said, these are people frightened that their way of life is being taken away from them. People have used all sorts of rhetoric to get their votes and raise money to scare these people into thinking that if a gay person gains their rights, they're somehow losing theirs, which is, as we know, is wrong. There's the pie is infinite. Everybody can have rights. but unscrupulous politicians, unscrupulous networks, bad journalists, they will keep reinforcing these ideas. And, Adam Noguchi at the Times did a really wonderful expose of this.
Adam Nagorny.
Nagorny, sorry, I'm
That's
mixing
right.
up my journalists and my furniture designers. Noguchi. Anyway, Adam Nagorny did a great expose of these people. When they, for instance, they thought, well, we've lost the abortion issue. They won that. Then they were going to take on gay marriage, and they said gay marriage. When they came out against it, they said this will be our new cash cow.
And it was for a while.
They raise money off of this.
Yeah.
And so what you've got is people creating this rhetoric now, when those poor, congressmen and senators were cowering in the Capitol when they were attacked on January 6th, there were people tweeting out fundraising appeals to make money off of that kind of hate and that kind of violence. They use it to make money and to monetize that. Social media has just accelerated it. And, I believe yesterday, the law enacted in Europe against social media misinformation went into effect. I wish we had a law like that here.
Well, it's all depressing and enraging. And you and your work at the foundation give us hope. But as you say, you're a small organization. Thank heavens the ACLU has partnered with you and that you're bringing these cases against these laws. Banning the flag. It's surrealism in everyday life. It's really.
It is. And I thank you for having me on to talk about it. It's really important because if they start with the symbols, they just don't stop there. You know what I mean?
No, it is utter fascism.
Yeah, it is.
Nice to see you, Charley. We all need to support each other in these troubled times.
I appreciate it. If people want to go to www.savetherainbowflag.com. There's an interactive map. You can just tap on any of the map pins. It'll take you to the towns and the stories there. And like I said, we're really proud of the fact that we're having wins, because for us, it's not enough just to report and to cower in the corner and to say we're afraid. We need to win. We need to give people hope. And it's happening, and we're helping in what little way we can, and we're proud to do it.
We will have some hopeful stories later. Thanks for being
here. Thank you, Gilbert. Thank you. Okay.
And we should say that the Lake Arrowhead LGBTQ group is planning a vigil for Lauri Carleton and Carleton, and a fundraiser to support her family. Many in the town are displaying pride flags in the wake of this atrocity.
And Travis Ikaguchi, of course, was killed by the local police who pursued him, and he just was firing at them. And it was a shootout, and he is gone. And I have to say, I'm grateful not to have to suffer through a trial of this for years.
Sure. Look, in terms of religious nuts, which of course Travis was, we had a woman here in New York, Imani Lucas, 29. She mowed down 7 people with her car in Midtown, and who said that her God spoke to her before ignoring the traffic signal. The victims ranged from 24 to 60 and were all expected to survive, but many had broken bones. One had a spinal cord injury. She's charged with 7 counts of attempted murder for her God.
And there's an incident here this week on the subway in Brooklyn where a guy on the platform groped a woman in her rear end, and she tried to push him off. They got on the train together, and he started screaming homophobic slurs at her, and then physically attacked her, beat her up, broke her nose. And that just happened as a casual daytime event. He has now been arrested, but that is the kind of thing that, who knows what the relevance of the homophobic slurs were, whether he perceived her as a lesbian or what, but it's just so casual and routine these days.
And we're going to get to some good news eventually, but let's go to Georgia, where a 5th grade teacher in Cobb County was fired after reading a book on tolerance for different gender identities to her class. That's Katie Rinderly at the Due West Elementary School in Marietta. Read the story "My Shadow is Purple" by an Australian author, Scott Stewart. In March, he did this, about a child who reflects on his mother's shadow as pink and his their father's shadow as blue and his as purple. She bought the book at the school's book fair, and she asked the kids to vote on a variety of books, and they overwhelmingly picked this one. The students discussed the message of acceptance of oneself and others, embracing diverse and complex identities and experiences, and she was fired. But a tribunal of retired educators ruled that she should not have been fired. But last week, the Board of Education there voted along partisan lines, because they've stacked the deck, to reject the decision of the tribunal. And the district lawyer said a one-sided viewpoint on political, religious, or social beliefs does not belong in our classrooms. So what about the perspective of our side? That's obviously not.
This is the rhetoric that is so revelatory that this is the way they're justifying this stuff. And this is the kind of rhetoric they use day after day in every venue, that we are somehow being inappropriately groomer, perverted, seducing. It just goes on and on.
Anyway, let's talk about race, but let's talk about.
Well, here's the good news from Georgia, which is the court that has stopped their no medical care for trans youth law in large part with a temporary injunction. Yay!
That's a Judge Sarah Geraghty, nominated by President Biden in 2022, and she once did impact litigation for the Southern Center for Human Rights. Elections have consequences. And in Arkansas, resistance, multiple high schools, including Central High School in Little Rock, have said they will not comply with the provision in the censorious law that bans AP African American studies classes from being taught, and will continue to teach it. The state education department says go right ahead, but it's not going to count towards any credits to graduate.
And Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders is standing by her refusal to approve the AP course, and continues to describe it as more, indoctrination. But in Alabama, the court there has lifted the temporary injunction against the law banning care for trans youth. So that goes back into effect, and now you can't get medical care for trans youth in Alabama.
But in Idaho, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld an injunction against an Idaho law barring trans athletes from student sports. They say it likely violates the Equal Protection Clause. It's an ACLU case, brought on behalf of a trans young woman, and of a cisgender then senior at Boise High School who was concerned about the law's invasive sex verification testing.
Once again, these fights are playing out in the courts, and I have to thank the ACLU and Lambda Legal and the National Center for Lesbian Rights and GLAAD in Boston, GLAD, not the media organization. Here, the lawyers are doing great work on these things and winning a lot of these cases. Now, they may all end up in a bad Supreme Court someday, but maybe it'll take so long that we'll have a little better balanced Supreme Court by then.
Well, in Virginia, a school board in Hanover County ordered librarians to use a book rating resource associated with the ultra-right-wing Moms for Liberty to rate or remove books from school libraries. Book Cooks aims to ban books on LGBTQ content and themes related to racism. The board has 100 books up for review, a quarter of them with LGBTQ themes.
An organization called Fix the Court, which usually concentrates on the Supreme Court, has filed a judicial misconduct petition in Texas at the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, against the Dallas judge who ordered Southwest Airlines to undergo training by the Alliance Defending Freedom about their employment practices, because Southwest lost a case for having fired a flight attendant who claimed a religious exemption for her hate speech online. And Southwest said, we don't discriminate. And the court had wanted them to say, we're sorry we discriminated, and made them undergo training by ADF. And now this outside group has filed a formal complaint against the judge.
In North Carolina, as expected, the Republican state Senate and House have overridden Democratic Governor Roy Cooper's veto of bills all mostly relating to transgender care. It's just, it's because some Democrat woman flipped, and now they have a veto-proof majority there, and that's what happened.
A sad case in the District of Columbia, where it turns out that the police seem to have botched an investigation of a gay man, Ernest Terrell Newkirk. They refused to investigate, in fact, and they lied about having investigated. They claimed they had, but they didn't. So Newkirk's surviving partner, Roger Turpin, has waded into this and dug up all sorts of evidence and information. Newkirk was found lying dead in the middle of a road. And
was he even dead? I mean, there was evidence that not enough was done to try to revive him.
True, absolutely true. So one of the charges is that the police didn't do enough and let him die. At any rate, there he was, dead in the middle of the road eventually. And Turpin says, his phone was missing, his wallet was missing. Somebody made phone calls on his phone after he was dead.
The car was stolen, and they found all kinds of things from other people in it, and then they didn't do any fingerprinting on it.
The cops say there was no evidence of foul play.
Please.
So anyway, thank you to Roger Turpin, who's pursuing this.
Mr. Newkirk was 55. He owned a landscaping business, and he was a chef for the Washington Wizards at the Capital One Arena. And he's been looking forward to DC Pride on May 27th.
In Denver, the Catholic Archdiocese is suing for the religious right to reject LGBT-affiliated and people of different religions from their preschool operation.
Yeah, right.
And they want state funding for that school. But we're not letting anyone but the Catholics in, and no one with LGBT parents or the kids or whatever.
This Supreme Court has been dismantling all those provisions of separation of church and state. And in Maryland, the Supreme Court says it's okay for a Catholic charity to discriminate against a gay employee. Catholic Relief Services refused health benefits to the husband of an unnamed plaintiff. The spouse had gotten the benefits for a year until they figured out that's a same-sex spouse. And the court, in a 4-3 decision, said that while the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that sexual orientation discrimination is covered under sex discrimination, Maryland, when they passed their law about employment, didn't do this explicitly 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And so it's up to the federal courts to fix this. I mean, that's a very disappointing decision.
We really have to prioritize a re-examination of what constitutes religious freedom, because the barn doors are open and the horses are out, and we need to rebuild the edifice.
All right, let's talk about Ron DeSantis. Again, we haven't seen the debate. That's tonight. We're taping on Wednesday. But he now has to submit to mainstream media questions and interviews. So he talked to Time Magazine, and he got asked, how would you respond if one of your own children turned out to be LGBTQ? He's got 3 kids, and his eyes apparently flashed, then shut down the question. He said, well, my children, are my children. We'll leave that between my wife and I, which is not only evasive but bad grammar. He compared gender-affirming care to taking his 6-year-old to get a tattoo and completely distorted what the care consists of.
Crazy.
They did a big expose on his life in the Times. Did you read it? I did. I mean, it's revelatory about his bullying and hypocrisies, but it also included hazing pledges at his Yale fraternity by pulling down their pants, mocking their genitals, or ordering them to simulate sex with one another, and ordering one to wear baseball pants with the back and thighs cut out, exposing buttocks and genitals. But don't say gay.
I'm glad that he's dropping in the polls. I hope he drops farther, and I hope people are more onto him about things like this. And I feel sorry for his kids who unfortunately look like him. And in other political news, George Santos is swimming around the periphery. His aide, you may remember a year or so ago, he had an aide who was accused of impersonating an aide to House Speaker Kevin McCarthy to do fundraising. Well, that aide, now an ex-aide, Santos did fire him when this came out, has pled not guilty to 4 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of identity theft. But
George Santos, you are not a credit to your sexual orientation. Back to Florida for a second. Equality Florida notes that new data from HRC indicates immense damage has been done to LGBTQ Floridians. 80% of trans and non-binary Floridians say the bans on gender-affirming care can impact their lives seriously, their mental health, and that of their loved ones. 81% have taken steps to relocate from Florida, and 93% feel less safe. Nationwide, 62% of people surveyed, of trans people, said, or non-binary, they would not consider living in Florida under these restrictions.
Who can blame them? Time out for one more brief piece of good news. In Pennsylvania, the York City Council has approved a ban on professional conversion therapy.
Right.
Of course, it doesn't touch the religious conversion therapy, but at least it's banned for professionals.
All right. The trans insurrectionist Jessica Watkins, who was sentenced to 8.5 years for her crimes on January 6th, is worried about being sent to a men's prison. Who is she reaching out to? That's Jessica there on the left. She's reaching out to Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, and Jim Jordan to pressure the Bureau of Prisons to place her in a women's prison. Good luck with that.
Well, that's really put them in a vice, hasn't it? Either they support the insurrectionists or they support, trans people. They can't have it both ways, and they're going to have to mess with someone. Congratulations to Jessica for putting them in that corner.
We're the ones you're supposed to call, Jessica, not
them. But don't bring your guns, please.
Call the ACLU.
And a prominent gay man who was the chief legal counsel to President Biden, Stuart Dellery, has resigned after a couple of years in the White House. No word on what he's going to do next. He worked in the Obama administration and then was, I guess, one of the highest ranking gay people in government.
Well, the first out gay person to serve as White House counsel. He worked on forgiveness of student debt, on the strategy with the COVID vaccines, and he oversaw the installation of all those Biden judicial nominees. But things are heating up with the congressional investigations. A lot of the press is focusing on. That's why part of the reason he may be getting out.
Well, they're still investigating Santos too. In LA, remember we told you about a confrontation between protesters and counter-protesters at a school in Southern California a few weeks ago. Turned more physical and violent than usually happens. Usually we're just on opposite sides of the street. Well, the anti-LGBTQ protesters brought their protests to LA at City Hall and then marched to the Board of Education. They were met with counter protesters from our side, and the police had to work hard to keep them apart. There was a big melee, and 2 of the people on our side got arrested. Strange.
Well, moving up the coast in California, the anti-LGBTQ Archdiocese of San Francisco filed for bankruptcy under their very anti-gay Archbishop Cordileone. There he is, as it faces more than 500 civil lawsuits for clergy sexual abuse filed under a relatively new California law that extended the statute of limitations for filing such suits. The 3rd diocese in California to file for bankruptcy over this, a dozen nationwide. Cordileone was a real leader in the fight against Prop 8, for Prop 8 campaign to repeal same-sex marriage. He was successful. And he also barred Nancy Pelosi from communion for her support for abortion rights. But what does he do? He coddles molesters.
Evades responsibility. Okay, one more piece of good news from New Hampshire, where the Republican governor, Sununu, has signed a bill that outlaws the gay panic defense. And it's a bipartisan bill. It was supported by both parties. But why did the Republicans support that? Because they extracted a promise from the Democrats that they would support their bill that demands that New Hampshire remains first in the country for primaries. I think we can live with that for outlawing the gay panic.
All right. In Miami, Florida, the Ms. World International pageant got underway on Sunday with out lesbian Emma J. Weber as a contestant. At the Ms. Great Britain finals, she waved a progress flag on stage and was the first out lesbian finalist. She's a mother of 2 and works as a forklift driver. She got into pageants after her divorce to boost her self-esteem. She says she's a tomboy and that that heels are not for her. She has won the Miss Paragon International 2019, a couple of others. She's very concerned about Florida and DeSantis. She says if my children went to school there, they wouldn't be able to talk about their mother because of that law. She's worried about it coming to the United Kingdom. She's all about being a role model.
Yeah, she was a little ambivalent about going to Florida for the Miss World pageant, but she decided that being out and visible was an important thing to do. We'll let you know the results of the pageant when we get them. And also a great triumph by Sha'Carri Richardson, who you may remember a couple of years ago. They're a great 100-meter runner, one of the best in the world, but she was disqualified from the Tokyo Olympics because she tested positive for marijuana. Now, of course, there's great controversy about whether marijuana should be considered a performance-enhancing drug for someone running the 100 meters. That sounds a little crazy, but nonetheless, that's what happened. So now she says, I'm not back, I'm better. And there she is winning the world championships this last week in wherever they held them. She took off. She made,
Budapest.
Yes, Hungary, in Budapest. She made a big show of throwing off her orange wig and won the 100 meters in one of the fastest times ever in the world. And she's bisexual, which is very out about having a girlfriend when we first talked about her a couple of years ago, which is why we're talking about her now. And is triumphing, is coming back from what was a very humiliating experience a couple of years ago, where she was not well treated. And now she is literally on top of the world.
Talk about someone we lost, Gloria Steinem, a late blooming trans woman who was the subject of the documentary My Uncle Gloria. She's died at the age of 87. She underwent gender confirmation surgery at 67 and founded the South Florida Gender Coalition at the age of 78, Her partner was Dan Friedman, a trans man. She was active on the boards of the Unitarian Church and Dolphin Democrats, an LGBTQ political club. Dan predeceased her by a year. It's never too late, folks.
No, and she became such a great activist in her 60s and 70s. Really amazing. So a loss, but thank you for your work, Gloria. All right, international news.
Yes.
Well, one of the most confounding stories of the week, the International Chess Federation has declared that trans women cannot compete with cisgender women in chess contests. Why? You tell me. Trans women have more endurance. I don't believe that. And something about hormones. It's crazy.
Why do they have sex categories for chess?
I have no idea, but it may have something to do with a long history of sexism in chess and making room for women to make sure that they have opportunities to compete. And of course, women competing ever since the Queen's Gambit, on Netflix or whatever it was, has just exploded. But and here's the kicker. Trans men, wait a minute. Trans women can keep trophies that they have previously won as men, but trans men must return trophies that they won as women.
I heard something, this may get me into trouble, and I hope not, but I heard it about 40 years ago, that one of the reasons that in general men were better chess players is because the object of the game is to kill the king, and men want to kill their fathers and women don't. And again, psychological. What else would explain it?
I think men are given the opportunity to do things like that and are encouraged to do it, and women are discouraged. And there you go. I certainly don't think men are smarter than women or have more endurance than women, or quite the contrary. So I would call it sexism. And sexism and sexual assault have evidently long been problems in the chess world, not to mention everywhere else. And Germany is standing up. The German Chess Federation says this is utter nonsense. Trans women are women, should be allowed to compete as women. This is crazy. So there is some pushback happening because people
you're hearing a lot about Putin in the news for knocking off the Wagner chief there. But a Putin advisor claims that Ukraine's military will become unified through gay sex like the Spartans of ancient Greece. Sergei Markov said the Spartans were united by a homosexual brotherhood. They were all homos, he said. And he said the same is planned for Ukraine's armed forces, that the US and Ukraine will use neuro-linguistic programming and other brainwashing techniques to turn Ukraine's soldiers gay against their will, making them zombified and unified through gay sex. This is all due in the spring of 2025, so it's not going to happen right away.
Well, I'm just thrilled to hear a Russian relating some gay history to the world. Sparta, yes, absolutely. And in Berlin, the police have arrested a suspect in the arson attack on the LGBTQ Holocaust Memorial, and think that this suspect may also have damaged a building where there's a lesbian organization. So one more attacker off the streets for the moment. And I'm very interested in the gay games coming up in Hong Kong in November. This, for years, this has looked dicey as China has cracked down on LGBTQ people and organizations. And the gay games went so far as to designate another venue, another city in another country as an alternate spot to hold some of their events. But they've just put out a press release about Hong Kong and touting all the great venues they have and the performers they've booked and how exciting all this is. But they also say that they too are concerned about what's going to happen in Hong Kong with all these LGBTQ athletes there in November. and they decided to test the waters a little. So they took a gay male couple and sent them out through the streets, just walking around, and followed them with a camera. And they turned it into a promotional video for the Gay Games 11. You can find this in our show note. And
yep, we will link to it. TV.org to sign up for our emails.
It's interesting because as the couple walks along, the shots that the camera shows are people in houses closing the door, walking away, frowning, very negative reactions. And then they show the gay male couple being very happy and participating in a lion dance and dragon thing. So it's getting more complex with the gay games in Hong Kong.
Well, it's not complex in Thailand. The military controls the Senate, and they nixed the pro-gay candidate for prime minister who won the most votes because, well, for a variety of reasons, and then just installed a person who got a minority vote but is conservative, and this was upheld by the Constitutional Court. So much for democracy.
All right, let's race through what we have left in 8 minutes. In AIDS news, are we moving on?
Yes, go ahead.
The U.S. Preventative Services Task Force has given A ratings to a couple of other PrEP drugs, which have been around for a while now, an injectable Apretude and Descovy, the alternative to Truvada. And this means you should be able to get them without any cost or copays. We'll see whether that follows through. And patient advocates in the U.S. held demos around the country as we're about to start negotiations with pharma and pharmaceutical companies over drug pricing, because the Inflation Reduction Act mandates lower prices for drugs. This is a billboard that the activists put on a side of a truck. The Chamber of Commerce and Big Pharma are suing to keep your drug prices high. They're suing to stop the negotiations and to keep drug prices high. Do you know that drugs under Medicare Part D are more expensive than under Medicaid or the Veterans Administration?
It's nuts. That's the pharmaceutical lobby.
Yeah, Medicare has to be able to negotiate.
Now, you know, Ann and I were not very favorable towards Red, White, and Royal Blue, but it was the top movie on Amazon last week, and the third most watched romantic comedy ever there. But one good thing about it was that the couple used condoms. They had to point this out there. Now, they didn't talk about safer sex. They just put there's a condom wrapper on a table there. The intimacy coordinator and director Matthew Lopez decided that the prince is probably not on PrEP because it would be too dangerous for him to ask for it, which is ridiculous. I mean, PrEP is easy to get, and it's free in the United Kingdom. He could have sent a friend to go get it. At the Dean Street Clinic. The first son in the movie, Alex, does get some advice on safe sex from his president mom, Uma Thurman, when he comes out to her.
Yeah, which he refuses to listen to. Oh, don't stop it. Shut up, Mom. And you were praising the movie for showing face-to-face gay male sex like this was, you know, the second coming.
No, it's that a lot of non-gay people couldn't believe we did it that way.
Well, then I turn on the latest chapter of And Just Like That, and there's Mario Cantone with his young Italian boyfriend, and they are having face-to-face sex. So I guess the message is getting out more broadly.
All right. There's a new movie out.
Not out yet. Naiad coming out
in October. About former Olympic swimmer Diana Naiad, who at the age of 64 swam over 100 miles from Cuba to Florida. She's going to be played by Annette Bening, who's 65, in her second big lesbian role after The Kids Are All Right. Jodie Foster plays Naiad's best friend and coach, Bunny Stahl.
And ex,
okay. And the film is going to be released October 20th in theaters, streaming on Netflix on November 3rd.
There's a great article. Put that photo up again, if you would, for a second. there's a great article in Vanity Fair from which this photo is taken about all of Annette Bening's training to do this. She is the third from the left in the red T-shirt there. That is Annette Bening. And
unrecognizable. Standing next to, in the back, Diana Nyad.
Correct. And in front of them, in the black T-shirt with the sunglasses, is Jodie Foster. And then in the blue shirt next to her is Bonnie Stoll. Thank you. Diana and Bonnie were briefly in a relationship and then decided being best friends was a better way out. But it sounds really terrific.
And Reese is there in the back. He's also in the movie. All right. A couple of weeks ago, the New York Times wrote about what Chris Cooper does on a typical Sunday. This past week, it was lesbian comedian Judy Gold, who lives in Provincetown in the summer. She said she runs into Billie Jean King at the tennis club, reads novels, writes jokes, and performs.
And Good Morning America threw a bachelorette party for Robin Roberts and her longtime partner, Amber Lane, who are about to get married after 18 years together. Now, I would call that a bridal shower, but they're calling it a bachelorette party. It was beach themed because they're such happy Key West visitors.
How the times have changed. Another thing I would not have known had I not read the New York Times is that a certain class of online gay men expect nude photos from others on their birthdays. It's not an invitation to hook up, one said. It's actually just supporting each other. This will not be happening on my birthday. I'm going to be turning 70 in October, and all I want is your support.
And I want to get through these last couple of items. One of the best things I read this week was an article by Matthew Rodriguez in Them, an online publication. Earth to Housewives, Jenna Lyons is a lesbian. Because you watch The Real Housewives of New York with this new cast, and all they do is pack, 6 suitcases for a weekend in the Hamptons, and Jenna Lyons shows up dressed like this and in jeans and a denim shirt, and they all yell at her all weekend long, and as if they have no idea what LGBTQ people are all about. They are just oblivious to gay people. And I think this is, it happens all through the show. And I'm delighted that someone wrote about it. Excellent piece. And Pay the Waiter.
Pay the Writer. By Tawny O'Dell at the Signature Center. It brings out gay actor Brian Batt, there in the middle, back to the stage as a literary agent for a world famous Black author and Vietnam vet played by Ron Canada on the right, one of whose ex-wives is played by Marcia Cross of Desperate Housewives there on the left. It's mainly Canada's story, the Black writer's story, including seeing him as a young man and these two guys getting together as business partners. And there are some very affecting scenes, but not enough to add up to a coherent or satisfying play.
Upcoming, Cynthia Nixon returns in the new episodes of The Gilded Age on October 29th. October 27th, a new show called Fellow Travelers with Matt Bomer. Looks very gay and naked. But this weekend, I'm going to take them up on the $4 movies on Sunday morning and go see Bottoms, which is a lesbian high school fight club starring, among others, Io Edebiri, who I've been watching in The Bear. She's excellent. So look out for Bottoms opening.
20 seconds, Ann. What else you got?
Oh, one of our viewers is recommending Euphoria, which has ended its second season. I haven't seen it. And that's it. That's what I got.
Very nice to see you. Take courage. Fly your rainbow flag if you can. Do it safely. We're not saying it's not challenging.
Goodbye.